What's going on, everybody? Mr. Leviticus Rex of the Teacher's Lounge. You guys are about to see what we've been working on for the last couple of weeks, what we have been planning and setting up for the last 28 years, and that is our Reach One, Teach One series. Episode 1 is coming at you right now. One of my good friends I have known for 20 plus years, for a long time, since elementary school, almost. A long time. Name is Mario Hoyos. He is now currently living in Las Vegas. He'll tell you a little bit more about that. But this is the first part of the Teacher's Lounge docu-series where we bring somebody within the real world who is doing something to reach one, teach one, who is doing something out of the box that will hopefully inspire someone else to join that path and trailblaze as well. So just jump right into it, man. Let us know kind of what your background story is, like who you are as a person.
Oh, man. That's a very loaded question. I think it's always hard to say, like, who you are as a person. I guess as far as background goes, I was born in Colombia, like in South America. My mom's American, dad's Colombian. My mom lived in Colombia, I think, like 25 years or something like that. So I was born there. And then when I was seven and a half, something like that, right. My mom and I moved to the States. It was supposed to be a temporary thing. And then life got in the way. And, lo and behold, I've been living in the States basically ever since. And yeah, grew up in Elkhart, Indiana. That's how I know you, obviously. Lived there, did elementary, middle school, high school. And then I went to Purdue University in Indiana also. And I had decided I was going to be a pharmacist, did 6 years of college to get there, was a pharmacist at CVS for all of like 4 months before I decided it actually wasn't for me. And so I quit. And at first I was looking at other pharmacy jobs and kind of took stock of my situation. And I was like, maybe there's something else that I want to be doing. Ended up, long story short, doing a coding boot camp. From there, bounced around a few startups, and I currently work for a company called Leafly. Been there for about a year and a half now, and we'll be there for the foreseeable future.
Kind of how you started. You said from Colombia. So mom was a single mom. So for you growing up, coming from a different country, moving into the States with a single mom, what did that representation look like for you as a kid?
It's so crazy. And I think really it's a testament to my mom that, like, as a kid, I think so much of your reality revolves around what your parents make it. Like, that's how you build an understanding of the world.
For sure.
And my mom did a really good job of, I think, sheltering me from, like, how hard it really actually was for her. Mm-hmm. My dad, when I was, 4 or 5 or something, like very stereotypical Colombian, got caught up in the narco trafficking thing. Yeah. And he was in prison in Miami, or just outside of Orlando, anywhere, somewhere in Florida, from when I was like 5 till I think like 11 or 12 or something, when he got deported and went back to Colombia. And at that point I was already living in the States. So it was interesting, my mom and my dad were never married. Right. My mom was married before I was born. I've got 2 brothers that, she was married to their dad. And I think I was kind of a surprise type of deal, life happens. Yeah. And so, but yeah, I mean, back to your point, like really growing up, even though it was like I had a single mom. Mm-hmm. For a while, one of my brothers lived in the States with us. He lived with us, but then he moved back to Colombia. It was a weird situation where I grew up in Colombia a bit with my brothers and my mom. And then it was just me and my mom. Then for a while it was like my mom and me and one of my brothers. And then it was back to my mom and I, but somehow, by some feat of like ungodly strength, she just like it's like I almost never, and maybe, you know, at some subconscious level, there's more to unpack there, but I never really felt like I was missing a dad. Like I never like had an obvious moment where I was like, wow, I need this like extra father figure. Like I don't know how she did it. Like I think now that I'm an adult, I can better appreciate how hard it all was.
For sure.
And you know, she's been a lot more vulnerable with me about like how bad it actually was. Yeah. But like as a kid, I had no idea. Like I knew. And when I was in, I think about 5th grade, my mom met a guy named Carlos, who they then got married a little bit after that. And so I did have, you know, at that point, like a stepfather growing up. And again, it's the kind of thing where you hear horror stories about stepfathers. Carlos was I think about as good as a stepfather gets. He was always willing to be supportive when he needed to be, but he didn't come in and try to, you know, uproot the way that I was doing things at that point. He didn't try to like pretend that he was now, like that he had been my dad all along, or like try to direct my life. Like he would, you know, try to impart, some words of wisdom on me here and there, but never like, no decision that I made at any point was he, you know, up my ass about it. And that the one that I think always stuck with me, which I think especially now after doing the whole pharmacy school career switch thing, he had told me at one point something like, if painting lines on the road is what makes you happy, then go paint lines on the road type of deal. It's like, man, if I had heeded that advice a little bit more closely, I maybe could have saved myself a lot of student loans.
Right. But we talked about it earlier, like something so simple like a phrase like that, but it has such an impactful value to it.
It does, yeah. It's like most of life is simple, but that doesn't mean it's easy.
In Elkhart, Indiana, you are a white kid in a predominantly black school at Roosevelt, right? Which was in the old Roosevelt building. Also in the PET program. So what did that dynamic look like for you?
You know, it's really interesting. Especially, I think when I was in Columbia, when as a kid, I never appreciated how prevalent in a lot of ways racism still is there.
Right.
Like there weren't a lot of black people growing up. You know, even myself, like I hardly looked like a, you know, stereotypical Hispanic person.
For sure.
Granted, in Columbia, there are a lot more people that look kind of like me. There's a lot of like European descent, like Spaniards that had come over. So there's a lot of fair-skinned folks, but there is still, you know, even to like the people of Native American descent, there is kind of like the fairer your skin, the higher your class type of mentality.
Gotcha.
As a 7-year-old, I never appreciated that.
Right.
And so coming to the States, I think also had kind of a unique view of the world in that we moved here because my mom was studying at a seminary in Elkhart, and because it was a seminary, a lot of the other people that lived there were also like internationals. So like there was like our little apartment across the hallway from me was like a Korean family.
Right.
Downstairs below us was a Chinese family. My other friend Mochi was from Japan. I had a whole like family of Kenyan friends, and so it's like you know, they say the United States is a melting pot, but I feel like I really got thrown into like an even more condensed melting pot within the United States. So it's like that was my impression, and I think, you know, to kids' credit, they just kind of like, it's like until you're like programmed to like discriminate and stuff like that, it's like literally we were all just kids and we were just having fun. Like I didn't care. It's like that they were black or that they were Asian, or you know, we had a lot of like from like I had a friend from Honduras, just like literally everywhere. And so it's like I don't think it was maybe a bit shocking to me to like go. I initially went to Hawthorne before going to Roosevelt, and that there was like so many black kids, and like it's like I almost went from being the majority to the minority.
Switched over,
And but I think I was still at an age where it's like you're not really thinking about that stuff.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, so I was just like, because I didn't know English when I moved here, I think initially I gravitated at school towards like some Hispanic friends, like the test or whatever to get into the PEP program, which is like for the gifted kids.
For sure.
And then that program was at Roosevelt, which demographics pretty similar to Hawk, except for in the PEP program, it was mostly white kids, which I think, you know, is in some ways an interesting, what's the like a microcosm of problems we have as a society at large. It's like, oh, here's like the school on the bad side of the tracks, and then it's like, oh, let's look at the gifted and talented program there, and it's like somehow mysteriously all the white kids are in there except for like Jordan Johnson. I think he was the one black kid in my class, literally the only one. And then like me, it's like I identify as Hispanic, but I'm not like obviously Hispanic. And then it wasn't until 5th grade that another one of our friends, Justin, was in there, who he's, you know, Mexican. And so it's like, even then, it was just funny. Like when you look at the actual composition of our school, and granted it's because for like the PEP program, kids would go from, like if they were supposed to be going to Pinewood or wherever it was, they would go to Roosevelt because that's where the program was. But yeah, so it was interesting. It's like as a kid, and I think as a kid that also, not only did I go to a school that was predominantly like black kids, but I think I also lived in the neighborhood. You know, I walked to school. I lived like 5 minutes from it. So like I was just in a predominantly black environment, whereas you know, a lot of the other kids in my class that came from some of the other elementary schools were coming from you know, white predominant neighborhoods. And so I think it was maybe more shocking to them. And I remember like, you know, we had a couple random lockdowns because there was like drive-bys nearby and stuff like that. Typical and I remember straight up this kid, Cody, his mom showing up to school like hysterical, pulled him out of class from the PEP program, never saw the kid again.
Through middle school, still in the honors program and the gifted and talented programs and the coursework. Get to high school, you graduate, our class graduates, you're valedictorian. You go on to Purdue. To describe what that atmosphere is like for you, being a valedictorian of your school in Elkhart, going to Purdue for pharmacy. Like what do those 4 years plus look like?
Man, when I was in college, I was like the kid who was like, man, I wish college never ended. I had a tremendous university experience. I had like there's no point in your life where you're surrounded by people who are all about your same age and who you all have at least like one thing in common with. It's like we could be totally different people, but we go to the same school, or like, you know, we're both trying to get a degree. Like you've got that baseline thing in common, and so it's like there's just so much growth that happens with that. Like you're all 18. You think like you've got the world figured out, and then you slowly start to realize that you actually don't know anything. And you're like with all these other people also realizing the same thing. And so it's a very, very powerful experience. But I think that like from an academic perspective, I kind of went into pharmacy because I was told it's not as long as like being a doctor. It pays really well. The market, when I started college, the market was still pretty good. And yeah, I think as like an 18-year-old, I just kind of was like, okay, that makes sense to me. Like I like science, I like math. For sure. I think I could be successful at that. And I just kind of like made up my mind and went. Like I remember, like I would hear the words where like sometimes the counselors at the college would like tell people to take a year and like figure out like what they really want to do, and I'd be like, oh, like, you know, it's like I'm so glad I already picked, like instead of wasting time doing that. And it's like I don't know why, I really don't know when I like for sure made this decision I was gonna do it. I just kind of did and never rethought it, even though like getting into pharmacy school is like a competitive process. For sure, getting through pharmacy school is like, you know, it's a pretty challenging thing to do. And even faced with like those challenges, I like didn't stop. Like it's like, do I really want to put in the challenge here for the outcome? Like, and I think part of it's just like my intellectual curiosity. Like the stuff I was learning is fascinating. Like how drugs work, fascinating. Like history of medicine, like a lot of these other things, it's like super duper interesting. even if at the end of the day when you're out in the real world, a lot of times your job has very little to do with some of the cool stuff you learn and a lot to do with like a lot of other things. And so, yeah, it's like on the one hand, I think I picked up a lot of valuable skills around like time management, you know, certainly communication skills, a lot of the soft skills that do help you to level up once you're out in the workplace.
Right.
But obviously now my pharmacy degree, I'm not really using it in any like direct way. But yeah, it was
Still worth
interesting. So hard to quantify, man. It's like, you know, looking back, you can always make decisions like, oh, if I had known, like, honestly, if I would have done a 4-year college degree for like computer science, I'd probably be further ahead in like my current career.
Right.
And would have probably no student loan debt because I had really good scholarships for the first 4 years. But since pharmacy school ends up being 6 years, and pharmacy school is more expensive than like your regular tuition.
Right.
Like I'd probably be like golden on that front, but it's like, you know, there's kind of unquantifiable things like experiences that I had that it's like, would I really trade those experiences?
True.
Meeting Carolina, like that wouldn't have happened probably. It's like, in some ways it's like life just kind of works out how it's going to work out for whatever reasons, but it's hard to say like the monetary amount. Like, do I wish I didn't have any student loan debt? Well, of course.
For sure.
Do I think college is for everybody?
Probably in the pharmacy program.
Mm-hmm.
Let us know kind of how that happened. And I know the full story, so we don't have to divulge into the full story. Yeah.
I don't know if I'm at liberty.
So, met her though, pharmacy school.
Yep.
What about her? What drew you to her? Like, what was?
Yeah. You know, we were always really good friends throughout pharmacy school. We were in this same like pharmacy fraternity.
For sure.
And we had a lot of like really good times, you know, going out like as friends. We always had a blast. There's one night that like we weren't dating, right? We were like straight up just friends, but we went out to my favorite place at the time, which was called the Neon Cactus. Just like we danced a bunch, and then we ended up at like this Taco Bell I'd always go to when I was hammered. And because it was open like 24 hours, it'd always be full of just like wasted college kids.
Yeah.
And we ended up there till like 4 or 5 in the morning, like just talking about like stuff. And it got like deep. Like she was telling me about like when her grandma passed away, and like all it was like we went from like, oh, we're just like out wasted, like dancing, and then it got into like, oh, like we're talking about like the real stuff in life that happens in life. Yeah. And yeah, like that's always one of the most memorable nights. But really, when it picked up is during like at the end of pharmacy school, you have to do clinical rotations where you go out and it's kind of like practice for being a pharmacist.
For sure.
And we had a program where you could go to Kenya for 2 months.
Right.
And we both went in the same cohort. And then we were partners for our work at the hospital there. And I think that's really like when things started clicking into place. There's a lot I think that we admired about each other, and it's such an overwhelming experience what we were doing there. So like to go through something like that with another person, it's almost like you can't not come out of it being really close.
Right.
And yeah, and I think beyond that, you know, we had just a lot of natural chemistry.
For sure.
And we spent like just about every waking hour together while we were there. And so that's really where like things picked up. And then, yeah, I mean, we've basically been together since then.
So, propose, what did that look like? How did that go? How did you plan it out? Or was it more a spur of the moment thing? What did it look like for those people who are thinking about popping the question? Like, how did you go about doing it?
Yeah. You know, we had been together for like three years or so at the time. And I was like, you know, like let's make it official. Like, you know, we had like talked about it. Like, we both kind of knew it was the likely outcome. At least we knew it's what we both wanted.
Right.
And then, you know, I wanted to make it fun. So her family, or her sister specifically, every summer not that they've moved, they don't, but they would throw this big summer party in August because Carolina's birthday's in August, her sister's birthday's in August, her niece's birthday's in August, my mom's birthday's in August.
Right.
So it was like this huge party, And,
perfect time.
Yeah, and I was like, all right, like, I bet I can like pull off a surprise here.
Yeah.
And so I reached out to like a bunch of our college friends, just like a bunch of people that we knew, and asked them to like send me a video of them like wishing her happy birthday.
Right.
And so I like edited those together, and then I like wrote out like my like proposal essentially, and I like recorded myself saying it. I downloaded this like app that had like a teleprompter on it, so that I would like, I tried to make it as professional as I could.
Yeah.
Edited it together, and then yeah, her sister helped me out a lot with like keeping it under wraps.
For sure.
But yeah, so at the party, you know, we were just partying as usual. We kept telling her like, hey, like, don't get too drunk this like tonight, cause like, you know, like, let's just have a fun. I don't remember what excuse we used. We were just like, try not to get too drunk.
Anything.
Yeah. And they set up like a projector and stuff, and yeah, we're like watching it, and she's like, oh my gosh, like she thought it was so sweet, but she thought that's all it was. It's like, oh, it's a video of my friend saying like happy birthday. And then I had my mom sitting by me, and I had put the ring in her purse, and like it's getting to the part where I start my like monologue, and her nephew trips over the projector cord, and we think it's just unplugged, and I start panicking. I'm like, oh no, and they're trying to plug it back in, and but like the wire's like broken, like it's actually broken, like the projector's done. Yeah, and I'm like, oh no, like this is awful, like what's gonna happen? And her sister comes up to me, and she like gives me this microphone, and she's like, you just gotta go for it. And like I practically blacked out. I just like took it. She saw me get the ring out of my mom's purse, and I think then she knew, because she started like crying right away. I gave some sort of abbreviated version of the monologue I had written. Again, I was blacked out, like too many emotions at this point. And yeah, I proposed. She said yes. Her sister had set it up so everybody had like sparklers in the background.
Right.
And the best part of it is, you know, most engagement photos, like you like trick your significant other into like, oh, we're going on to like this place, like you should look nice. They like have their friends get them like a manicure or whatever. But this party always has a theme, and this year it was like 60s theme. So we're wearing like these like ugly tie-dye shirts. We're barefoot, and like that's our photo.
Pharmacist for a little bit, right?
Yep.
Kind of mentioned that you worked at CVS.
Yep.
What did that feel like? What did that entail? What was kind of the final straw before you just said, I'm through?
Yeah, so in pharmacy, there's a lot of different jobs you can do as a pharmacist. Some of the, I would say, more desirable ones are really hard to get into. It requires like additional training after graduation, and the competition's a lot higher.
Right.
And the pharmacy market as a whole is pretty saturated right now, so it's hyper-competitive landscape. But after graduation, Carolina had gotten a residency, so she was doing post-grad training in Texas.
Right.
And so I was like, well, I just need to figure out a way to get to Texas. And so I took a job at CVS, which I'm not shy about trashing at all. I think they are a garbage company, and I'll die on that hill. But yeah, I took a job at CVS because it was in Dallas, which was 2 hours away from where she was in Texas, in Temple, but it was like, you know, way closer than Indiana or whatever. And so I was like, well, you know what, whatever, like I'm just gonna go to CVS. They at least like pay pretty well, and I'm just gonna try and like grind it out, pay off my student loans, like the money will be worth it type of deal. And oh my gosh, dude, it's like, it was so bad. For some people, they thrive in that environment. I'll also die on the hill that like community pharmacists do a super important job. They're kind of like the last line of defense. But like how retail pharmacy works, especially at like the big chains, is it's basically just, they kind of just churn and burn pharmacists. A lot of it is what it is. They like hire them. They know you got student loans, so like you're gonna work.
You're gonna take it.
Work conditions are awful. And some stores are better than others, but I was at the busiest store in Dallas, and my manager from the jump, like I knew that we were gonna have like a pretty adversarial relationship.
Okay.
We just, the way he talked about things was, you know, kind of misogynistic,
Gotcha.
very like, I don't know. We didn't get along, but I was like, you know what, like it'll be fine. Like we're not gonna be actively at work at the same time that much. It'll be okay. But yeah, it's just a very high stress environment, especially being at the busiest one in Dallas. It's like the company only cares about pushing out as many prescriptions as possible.
Definitely.
And they want to do that with the least amount of help possible. So you're always short-staffed. It's all about the metrics instead of like about the patients, which is like the part of pharmacy that I did always enjoy. Was like interacting with patients was always a joy. Right. That was definitely the best part of the job. But I got to do very little of that. In some ways, it's like you're just it can feel like you're a very, albeit well paid, but just like a robot. You're just like taking these scripts, you're like verifying what's in them, and super high stress environment. You know, you got the drive-through going off, you got the phone always ringing.
Right.
You're pulled in a million ways. It's this kind of perverse work environment where you want to meet the metrics enough that management doesn't come like annoy you about it, but you also don't want to exceed them so much, because then what they do is they just move the goalposts further out. They're like, or if you're doing really well at a store, if you've got a store just humming along, they're like, oh, you're doing great, why don't you go help this other opportunity store, they call it. And so then they'll take you from like, you know, you do all this work to like make a place run smoothly, and they'll move you over. And you know, for a while I could tolerate it. Like at least some of the days went by pretty quickly, even if they were like, even if I was miserable when I was there, they'd at least go by quickly. But it just started to really wear on me. I slowly started becoming like a shell of the person I was. Like when I wasn't at work, I was just like so stressed out about the next time I was gonna have to be at work. And not to mention like the schedule I worked, I was every other weekend I was at CVS like the entire weekend. It was like Saturday I was there for 12 hours, Sunday 10 hours or something like that. And so it's like not only is it this like super stressful work environment, now you take half of your weekends of the year when like your friends and everybody else has time off and just take them off. So it's like, yeah, you're making good money, but like at what cost? And for me it was like, well, okay, so like I'm making this money, but my mental health is like certainly suffering. Like my relationships, it's like it's hard to even have time for them. Like Carolina would drive up, like on the weekends that I'd work, Carolina would come up to Dallas, but it's like we'd have like a couple hours in the morning before I went to work, if that, and then maybe a bit after work, but I'd have to go to bed kind of early to get back to work. And it's not like I was a particularly fun person during those hours because I was so stressed out about work. And it was just like, on top of all these things, that store was cutting corners from a safety and compliance standpoint that I did not feel comfortable with. I felt like it was just a liability time bomb. And I was like, you know, this is like my license. Like I don't want to go down with this shit. Yeah, like there were several times where I tried to rectify some of the situations, and basically it's just like, well, we need to get the scripts out the door type of deal. And I was like, all right, like, yeah, even from like a moral standpoint, even I just like broke. I was like, I can't do it. So I was toying with the idea of quitting, and Carolina, you know, to her credit, like I didn't have a backup plan, but I told her I like was thinking about quitting, and she's like, yeah, this is awful for you. Like you should just do it. And I was like, you know what? Okay, like let's do it. So we got wine. I drank a bunch of wine. Sent an email to my manager. I was like, I'm done.
There we go.
Some guy from upper management tried to call me to like get me to stay, making like the false promises they always make. And then I was like, nah, like I think I'm still gonna take my chances. And the nice part is I was like, you know, I tried to be professional and do the 2 weeks notice thing, but they were like, thank God. The manager was just like, oh, well, just burn up the vacation hours you have. Don't bother coming back in. And I think he thought it was gonna be like a punishment. I was like,
no problem.
Say no more, my man. Like, I'm done. Yeah. I was like, all right. Yep. I won't be back. So that was it. Yeah. Okay. And that was kind of where my pharmacy went. I learned the very hard way that money definitely isn't everything.
So now, have no idea what you're doing. You quit your career that you spent 6 years building up to. You're in Texas, right?
Yep.
Fiance is doing her thing in pharmacy. You have no idea what to do.
Yep.
So kind of tell us about what you're doing now and how it started.
Yeah, so initially I was like, well, even though the market's saturated, I was like, I'm just gonna find a way to get a better job.
Right.
So I start like reaching out to like my network, trying to see if I like what's out there. Start looking up pharmacy jobs, but again, like so many of the pharmacy jobs required additional training I didn't have, or it's like it got to a point where even the ones that like did require additional training, like I'd read the descriptions and I wasn't like, oh, I want to do that. Right. It's like, sure, this is better than CVS, but I still wasn't like,
well, I won't like
excited about it, I guess. But I mean, I was doing my due diligence. I was writing cover letters, tightened up my resume, putting out applications, but mostly crickets. Like I wasn't getting a lot of hits, and I had done a little bit in late college, and then while I was working at CVS, I had been doing online like programming tutorials just out of curiosity. Yeah. I was like, oh, like this, it's interesting. Like I want to know how this works, and I quite enjoyed those tutorials, and I had a few friends, but mostly my friend Dana. He was a software engineer at the time. Like he had gone to school for computer science, and he came out. He graduated a year earlier than I did, and he just seemed like way more engaged in his work. His flexibility, like relative to what I had at CVS, was just like mind-boggling to me, and like I had been doing these programming tutorials, so I knew that I like enjoyed the process, like that it like scratched an itch for me, and so I started to like think seriously, like, like what would it take to get a job as a developer, and so I was kind of looking at like what it would take to teach myself, because online you can literally teach yourself to do just about anything these days. And then I started looking at like what kind of programs there were, and that's when I learned about like coding boot camps. There was a few in Dallas, and I was kind of looking at the curriculums, and you did have to pay money for them, but I was like, I've already got this pharmacy student loan debt, and relative to a lot of my peers in pharmacy, it honestly isn't that bad. And so I was like, oh, what's another like whatever amount if it means like I get to do something that I might enjoy more. And what really sold me on it, I think, was like having the structure and the accountability. Like when you're learning something new, you don't know what you don't know, and so to have somebody be like, here's like the things kind of in an order that makes sense, that was appealing to me. And so I took a bunch of the curriculums and I sent them to Dana, and I was like, hey, which one of these makes the most sense to you? Like, if I was going to try and do this, like, which one of these do you think gives me the best chance? And so he told me which one, and I looked at the cohort dates, and there was one that started in, like, 3 weeks or something.
Nice.
And I did the numbers, because, I only had whatever savings I had put away from working at CVS. And so I did the numbers. I was like, okay, well, if I take out a loan for this coding boot camp, and I can get a job like pretty shortly after it, like my savings should last me. Like it wasn't going to be by a lot, but it was like, if I could pull this off, this could make sense.
And where are you working at now?
Now I work at a company called Leafly.
Okay.
Yeah, which basically it's to help
you. What is Leafly?
Yeah, it's funny. It's a company to help you find and buy cannabis, basically. And so,
which is legal in Nevada.
It's legal in Nevada, and we're not actually a plant-touching business. So, like, we're just a website.
For sure.
We provide dispensaries with tools to, like, upload their menu. We provide brands with, like, advertising.
For sure.
And we also put out a lot of really educational content, which I think is what I really like about Leafly in particular, is that it takes a very educational approach to, like, cannabis. But, yeah, it's kind of funny. I'm sure my mom probably wasn't imagining that I was going to grow up to be selling weed on the internet type of deal. And in some ways, I guess it's sort of tangential to pharmacy in that I'm still selling drugs in some manner or another.
You had a brief rap career, I believe, right?
Yeah. You could call it a career.
So tell us about that. kind of what got you into it, and do you still kind of dabble in the arts and music and whatnot now?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll start by saying career is a
strong word.
Yeah, it's a very
Okay.
very flowery word for what it was. But yeah, I mean, and, maybe a lot of it's growing up the way I did, but like rap was always a huge part of my
right,
of my upbringing,
for sure.
And like even in like middle school, like with a lot of my friends, we'd be like having freestyle battles or like even freestyling, just like try and say the funniest thing you could was something we do a lot. So it's like it in some ways, and like for whatever reason, I'm very good at memorizing like lyrics, and so it's like I've been whether it was somebody else's words or my words, I was rapping my whole life in one way or another.
Right.
And yeah, it's so funny. Like in middle school, having rap battles with people that they'd be like, "Oh, you got to rap battle this like new kid," and it's like looking back on it, it's very hilarious. But even in middle school, like my friend Dana and I, we had recorded some songs, which I'm so glad probably like don't exist anywhere anymore. They were probably on MySpace at one point. I had made songs with like Antonio Mort, with Tony Mo, and it's pretty crazy that even back then, like technology's come such a long way, but even back then you could like, if you wanted to, you could record record yourself over instrumentals and like make like a song. And so yeah, I did that in middle school. In high school, there was a point where we would make like kind of joke songs here and there. But in college, I've always been drawn to music. In college, I did what seemingly every man does in college, which is try to learn to play the guitar. And I got okay at it. I didn't go too far beyond like the 8 chords everybody knows.
For sure.
And I learned how to play a few songs. And there was a point where I was like, okay, like, like I want to be in a band or something, or at least like try it out.
Right.
Ended up through like a friend of a friend that had a metal band, and they're like, oh, why don't you audition for this? And I was like, honestly, like I'm not good. Like if you got, especially like metal's like a lot of times a very technical,
right? Sure.
Like you have to be very technically strong. But I was like, but you know what? I mean, whatever. I got nothing to lose. So I go to this like audition. It's just like these college guys. They've got this band. They asked me to like try and play a couple of like their things, and I apparently did it well enough that they're like, okay, like yeah, you're good. Like you'll be in our band. I didn't fit in with them culturally at all.
Right.
But I was like, hey, whatever. Like I'm in a band. Like let's do it. Yeah. And then so I was like, okay. First practice. Some weeks after that, they're like, all right, we're practicing at so and so's house. So I go there, and like being who I am, I'm like on time. I'm like ready to go. And it's like, by the time we got the whole band, finally to be just there, it was like an hour later. And then they wanted to just like smoke hookah instead of like practicing. And I was like, immediately realized, I was like, wow, I can't do this. Like there's like serious discipline missing here. Like this doesn't stand a chance. And so I pretty much told them, I was like, hey, like I'm not doing this. And but I still was like itching to like do something.
Yeah.
But I was like, at this point, I just wanted to be like self-reliant. I was like, I don't want to have to count on anybody else.
Right.
So I got on like Reddit and looked up like the making. I was like, well, I used to make like rap songs. Like maybe I can do that again. And so I got on the Making Hip Hop subreddit, like looked up like what's the easiest way to get started making beats. Bought this, I still have it upstairs, but like the little MPK mini keyboard.
Yeah.
I like got like a cracked version of Ableton on my laptop.
Nice.
I started like toying around making just like god awful beats, but yeah, but it was really fun. Yeah, exactly. But it was really fun. And then kind of the next year in college, the dorm room that I was set up in, I had this like sliding closet door thing, and so I bought some like soundproof like foam and just like put it in the closet. Bought a mic, set it up in there. I could like hook up the mic to I got like some monitor speakers, and then same thing. Kept messing. We made a lot of like messing around songs with my friends in there. But then sometimes when I was, kind of feeling inspired or whatever, I'd get in there and start making beats, and eventually like started writing lyrics again. And I went through like a pretty big breakup at the time, and it was just like a weird point in college. It was like kind of my last year on campus, and a lot of kind of like, I guess, maybe angst for lack of a better word. And so, yeah, I started like recording some songs, and then I had like 6 or 7 of them that I was like, it's like on the face of it, they weren't great, but I felt like I at least had something to say, and it was like when I listened to the songs, it meant something to me, and I was like, you know what, like, I literally have nothing to lose, like, I'm just gonna like put an album cover on this thing and like put it out.
Yeah.
And I did, like, I put it out. It's like on Spotify to this day.
It's on Spotify to this day.
Yeah. It is, if you want to find it. And like, it's not really good.
What is it? You're not gonna tell us what
it is. I don't care. No, yeah. My rap name was Mario Inorganism, and the EP was called My Brain.
Okay.
And yeah, so it's out there, and I started going to some open mics and did some of the songs. But about the peak of my career was I did it was like a Battle of the Bands thing at Purdue.
Yeah.
And I was the only rap act, but I ended up winning that, and I think it was like a $250 cash prize or something like that. So
there we go.
But like, there was definitely something to being on stage. Like, I had a freaking blast
pretty good rush.
doing it. Yeah. And I had this like chip on my shoulder at the time, because like the My Brain album, it's very like introspective, very like sad. I feel like that's when I was like most inspired to make music. But being the generally upbeat person that I am, like a lot of my friends thought I was going to be making like bangers, and so I did. So I made one where I'm just going to make a song and try to just make this shit like really hype, like in your face, like probably more what they were expecting. And so I basically made it for this Battle of the Bands set to like end it with like on like a high note, and it worked out.
We talked about it earlier today, before we started our kind of series, about school itself and not being prepared, or not being prepared properly for real life and real world and getting out into the world. So what are a couple things, two of the biggest things that you feel would be beneficial for people younger than us, maybe in high school, or maybe just getting in college or getting out of college? What are 2 things that they need to know about, that teachers won't tell them, that parents don't know about, or they just neglect to tell them because they just don't know either?
Yeah. I feel like schools are lacking in like basic financial literacy. I feel like that should be talked about more. Right. The true impact of like taking out student loans to go to college. Like, I think that it's the default option when you're in high school. They're like, yep, the next step is to go to college. And like, if that means you got to take out gargantuan loans, so be it. Where like, it's like, I think you need to be very conscious of like what scholarships you can get, what are the job prospects maybe, and like, I'm not here to say like don't chase your passions, but at least be realistic about like, if you're going to study something because it's your passion, that like understand that like if you come out of there with $80,000 in debt and like you can't get a job, like, are you okay with that? Like, do you still think it's worth it? I'm not saying that it's not, but it's like there's not enough placed on that. And then I would say just like general financial literacy, like knowing more about like investing, like why you should start investing as early as you possibly can. And in some ways that kind of goes back to the student loan conversation. Like if you're too saddled by student loan debt, you might not have enough leftover money to invest. And that's going to make it a lot harder to like get your financial freedom someday. And so things like that, like taxes. How do you do taxes? Like credit scores, what are they? How do you build one? Why is it important? Things that like you don't learn in high school that are critically important when you're like an adult in the real world.
Right.
I think that's a big one. And then I think the other one, and I think some teachers do a good job of trying to like instill this, but learning how to love learning. Like if you can find, like, whatever your interest is, whatever your proclivity is, if you can learn how to teach yourself about it,
right,
and do that very seriously, like, you're gonna be successful.
So, moving forward from that, do you have any final thoughts that you kind of want to add to it for everybody who's kind of listening, who's bought in so far? Like, what do you have? You have to give them one final piece of information regarding anything, whether it be finances, personal life, personal growth, whatever it is.
Yeah, you know, I won't pretend to have all the answers, but I think, like, one thing that I've been learning that I think is pretty eye-opening is that the people that you think have it all together don't.
Right.
And that, you know, people that maybe have achieved whatever your definition of success, it might seem like it's unattainable to you, but really it's not. It's like, most of us don't know what we're doing, no matter how competent we may seem at times. Like,
That's true.
Literally every day at my job is I'm confronted with things I don't know, and it's figuring out from there, like, how to know them.
Yeah.
And so, really, that's the biggest thing. Like, it's good to have people you, like, idolize, hopefully for, you know, positive reasons, but, like, don't fall into the trap that, like, they're doing something that you're totally incapable of doing. Because most things can be done, like, with enough, like, consistency and hard work.